My name is Jordan Grona, and today we're going to talk about Elm, which is a delightful language for front-end development. When you want to do front-end development today, you have to use JavaScript because it's everywhere. If you want to use React, Angular, Vue, vanilla JavaScript, you have to use JavaScript to have interactivity on your website. And the biggest advantage of JavaScript is that it's backward compatible. That means that if you have a website that is working today with JavaScript on it, in 20 years, 50 years, 1 century, it should still work because the web platform is backward compatible. It's a big advantage, I think. But for me, it's also its biggest disadvantage because if you can't break compatibility, you can deprecate things. That means you can't remove things from the language. Even the things that are a bit weird, for example, in JavaScript, if you try to compare null and zero, null greater than 0 is false, null equals to 0 is false, but null greater or equals to 0 is true. So a little weird. But as this is in the language since the beginning, you can't remove that because if some website depends on this, it will break. So if you have a look at the JavaScript syntax size over time, it will only grow because you can't remove anything that you add to the language. So each time you add a new tiny functionality, new tiny feature to the language, it will remain forever inside the language. Especially during the new ES6 version where we've added a lot of things. So everything is here to stay and it will never be removed from the language. Even the mistakes and the badly designed API, if there are any. So there is a lot to learn because we're not using JavaScript the same way that it was conceived. So we've added a lot of features to the language and the language has become quite complex. There are a lot of ways to do the same thing. For example, if you try to use asynchronous operation, you can have callbacks, you can have promise, you can have generators, you can have async await functions. There are a lot of things to learn, a lot of ways to do things, and once you've learned them, you need to learn when to use one over another. So a lot of things to learn. But even after you've learned the language itself, you have to learn its ecosystem because usually you will want to use some framework, some library because the standard library in JavaScript is pretty poor. So you have to learn React, Angular, Vue, enough to know which one to use when, or if you even need to have a framework like that. And once you learn all of that, if you want to go to production, you need to learn a little bit about tooling in JavaScript. So how Webpack works, how you can configure it, parcel, etc. So there are a lot of bundlers, but you have to learn this also. Another drawback of JavaScript is that it's by essence dynamic. That means you can reference some part of the code dynamically, making it hard to statically analyze the code. So it's hard to optimize. You can't really do a good dead code elimination or tree shaking because you're never sure that a chunk of code is not used. With ES6 modules, you can now know for sure if a file isn't used, but you can't know if inside the file that is used, everything is used or not. So you have some assets that are bigger than expected because you're forced to use something to have some chunks of code that you're not using. But still you have a complex build state because we still want to eliminate everything that we can. So it's pretty hard to optimize as a language. But for me, the main drawback of JavaScript is its low confidence level because for many reasons. For example, you don't have, because of null and undefined values, you can have a runtime exception in production. I would even bet my house that the majority of bugs in JavaScript are caused by null pointer exception, undefined is not a value, etc. So we will see that in Elm it's a bit different. You have really minor editor assistance because as the language is dynamic, a tool can only assist you to a certain point, and after that it's up to you to fix things, leading to painful refactorings. If you want a comparison, just have a look at the Java ecosystem. I'm not very fond of Java, but I have to admit they have a really wonderful ecosystem for tooling. You can do a lot of refactoring from your editor. It's pretty nice. The feedback cycle is pretty slow because often you will need to go to runtime to see if something is working or not. Even if you're practicing TDD, test-driven development, there are a few things that you won't notice until you try to actually run your code. So it's a pretty slow feedback cycle. And the main drawback for me is that dependencies in JavaScript are risky. I can talk about that during an entire session, so I won't go into further details right here. But I have a few toolings that you can check. In NPM, a package can do almost everything, so it can call another server, it can do whatever it wants. So installing a dependency is always risky in NPM. Everything leads us to Elm. So what is Elm? Elm is a type functional language to create fast and reliable web application. There are a lot of things in this definition. We will try to break things. So first, we can notice that it's really domain specific. In the definition, it says it's to build a web application. So it's not used as JavaScript in server or for your coffee machine or for your Raspberry. It's only focused on website and web application, so it's really specific. And it does only one thing, and it does it well. Also, it's something that is statically typed. We've talked about JavaScript being dynamic. In Elm, it's not. So everything can be analyzed by your tools. That means many bugs don't even compile. So you cannot send some bugs to production because it won't compile. The editor can really help you with every refactoring. And when you try to refactor your code, it's always compiler driven because you will change something and the compiler will throw nice and helpful errors to help you fix what you've just broken. So refactoring is compiler driven. And the feedback cycle is really fast because as you get your errors instantly when you type your code, you can know if something is wrong. In fact, in Elm, we're saying that once it compiles, it means it works. So pretty nice. It is safe. Don't trust my word. I have a graphic right here showing the runtime exception encountered by NoRedInk, which is a pretty big website, e-learning platform, and a big user of Elm. So during 3 years, they've had like 62,000 JavaScript runtime exception against almost zero runtime exception with Elm. Which is quite impressive. Of course, they have like 17,000 line of code of JavaScript, so it's pretty big number. But you have to balance it with 200,000 line of code of Elm. So 17,000 line of code in JavaScript can trigger 62,000 runtime exception, while 200,000 line of code in Elm produce almost zero exception. So it's a language that is by design really safe for your production. So it's a functional programming language. So functional programming is blah blah blah. In fact, I don't care about the academic definition of functional programming. For me, functional programming just means that it's honest. It's being honest. Let me explain my point. So in JavaScript, for example, if you are a send email, if you have a send email function, here, when you're calling this function, if you don't look at the body, you don't know what happens. Anything can happen. And for example, you don't know that if the user email is not provided, it will throw an error. And if you don't know that, you don't use try catch around your code, and you won't catch this error in production. So in production, you have something that can be broken just because you don't know how the send email function is implemented. But it could be even worse. For example, it could launch nuclear missiles on somebody, or transmit your credentials to someone. So with functional programming, you wouldn't be exposed to this kind of things, because in Elm, side effects are explicitly declared. So if your function can produce side effects, for example, sending something over network or anything else, your function will show that it does something. So you can't have unwanted side effect. That's why I talk about honesty, because a function says exactly what it does, and it doesn't do anything that you can ignore. The language is really fast. Everything is static, so you can eliminate every chunk of code that is not used. You know everything that is used inside the language, so pretty nice. Everything is pure, so you can have further optimization from Ugly5JS. So you have small assets, and you can have some comparison on internet. So it's really, really fast. If you have a look at the guide of Elm, you can see this sentence that is quite important to me. Elm has a very strong emphasis on simplicity, ease of use, and quality tooling. And behind this simple sentence, you have all the philosophy of Elm, focusing on simplicity, so the language will decrease in syntax over time. It's really easy to use, and everything is done for newcomers to not be lost. And the tooling is really, really good. So simplicity and ease of use, because it's focused on one purpose, so you don't need a lot of features inside the language. You have a very small list of features, and you can learn it really fast. Even over time, the language has lost some syntax more than adding more syntax, so it's simpler and simpler. The API are really well thought, because you can break things, because the language is compiled, so when you compile things, you don't care about what was original source code. So you can deprecate things between versions. It's not a problem in Elm. Everything is explicit, meaning that there's nothing hidden like in JavaScript. Everything is honest and explicit. The quality tooling, when you install, for example, Elm, you have a compiler install, a project starter, a package manager, a dev environment, a REPL to execute some Elm commands in the terminal, and a doc tool. And the test runner, there are 2 test runners in Elm, but they are compatible with each other, and everybody is using the same test library. So it's really nice. The documentation is unforced, meaning you can't publish a package without having a documentation with it, and it's all available on the Elm website, the Elm package website. So it looks like that. It's pretty nice. So you're never lost with someone else's code, because you have some documentation. The versioning is enforced. I don't know if you're familiar with semantic versioning, but it's this triplet of numbers representing the version. The last one is called the fixed number, and when you increment it, it means that nothing has changed for the outside world. So anybody that relied on your package can update safely without breaking anything. But as soon as you've added something to your API, you need to increment the second number that is called the minor. That means something was added, but it won't break any people's code because it's only something that was added. But as soon as you have a breaking change, so you remove something, you change a behavior or anything else, you need to increment the major version. So in NPM, this is used, but it's only a convention, so it depends on the maintainer of the package. If they make a mistake or you know this rule, you can update your dependencies and break your application. In Elm, it's not possible because the compiler will decide which version your package has. So for example, if you try to break something, the compiler will say, okay, it's a major version, so you need to increment the major version. So when you update your dependencies in Elm, you're sure you won't break anything. So it's pretty nice. The community is awesome. In fact, if you have a look at the talks of the creator of the language, Evan Sapliki, you can see that it's mainly focused on how to build a community, how to animate it, how to build trust in the community, and a reflection on what is success on the online communities. So these three tools are really, really nice. So if you want to have a look, we have the links to the slides at the end of the presentation. This community gathers on Slack and on a Discourse, which is a forum for Elm. So let's have a look at the syntax. And for that, we will go to the terminal and use Elm REPL. So as I said, when you install Elm, you have access to many tools. Here we will use the REPL, which will allow me to type some Elm command inside my terminal. So okay, let me just move that. Okay, perfect. So let's start with something really simple. So for example, a string. If you have a look at the return, it returns the value, so hello, and here you have the type of the return value. So here the type say it's a string with S uppercase S. So let's try a number. First thing we can notice is that the type is a bit different. Here it's a number with a lowercase n, because number only represents a type variable, meaning that the compiler knows that it's a number, but it don't know exactly what it is. Because in Elm, you have two types of number. You have float and you have int. So here, the number is just the compiler saying, okay, I know this is a number, but I'm not sure if it's a float or an int. That's why we have a lowercase n right here. So you have some basic operation, for example, the entire division. Here we have an int, so we can see an int. We can concatenate things, maybe. Hello. So let's see something simple. Here we have some error from the compiler because I've tried to, let's see the error. I cannot do addition with string values like this one. So in Elm, you don't concatenate things with the plus operator like in JavaScript, but you have to use the double plus operators. But if you have a look at this error, it's pretty nicely done because the precise location of your code is displayed with a really great explanation on what happens and how you can fix that. So it's pretty nice. In Elm, the errors will guide you to working code, so it's pretty nice. So let's see, what do we have else? We can have some variables. So for example, I can say is code current true, 42 equals to true. So declaring a variable is just assigning a value to a name. And here, for example, we have some conditions. So if is 42, then, so if you have a look at the syntax right here, we don't have parentheses, we don't have brackets, only if the condition, then here this is the value that will be returned if it's true. So hello. Then you have a else, and there you can return the value if it's false. When you try to press enter, you can see that it returns the value. So in Elm, conditions are an expression and not a sentence like in JavaScript. In JavaScript, a condition doesn't return a value. In Elm, it does. So this expression is equals to hello conf42. Okay. So we have condition. It's a functional language. So let's create a function. To declare a function, you just have to write the name of the function, the parameters. So here, let's say we have two parameters, A and B, and equals to the body of the function. So here it will be A plus B. So as you can see, the syntax is really simple, really straightforward. Not a lot of characters to type, so pretty nice. If you have a look at the function signature, you can see that it's pretty new. That means that it's a function which takes one number, another number, and returns a number. So this is a function type signature. What do we miss? So, for example, the arrays in Elms are called list. So it's a list of A. A is like number type variable. It's a compiler saying, okay, it's a list of something, but I don't know yet what is inside. So it's a list of A. But if you put something inside like hello, it will say, okay, I know it's a list of string, which means you can't use different kind of value inside the list. If you try, you will have an error from the compiler saying, okay, the second element is a number, the previous elements were string, so there is something wrong. And if you want to do this anyway, you can have a look at this link to know how to do that. If you are trying to convert this int to a string, you can use this function. So as you can see, it will try to learn to teach you how to fix your mistakes. So that's really, really helpful. We also have some tuples, which is 2 or 3 values. When you want, for example, to return 2 values from a function, you can return a tuple. So, okay, you can have 3 values inside the tuple if you want. If you are more complex data structure, you can use something that isn't, you can use something that looks like the objects in JavaScript. So, for example, I can say that I have an object with a login being Jordan and the password being password. Wait, I need to be safe right here. Perfect. So this is a record. With two elements, a login and a password. So perfect. Often in Elm, you will try to type your values. So you will have to type this, and as it's pretty long, you will often use type aliases. So you can create a type alias and say, okay, the user is the same thing that exactly this. And then you have access to a new function that was created with this declaration, which is the user function that can create a user. So the user function is a function that is expecting one string, another string, and returns a user. So if you do something like that, you will have a user with a login Jordan and a password. So this is the first kind of type that you can create, a type alias. So it's not it's helpful, but it's not revolutionary. But in Elm, you also have custom types. So custom types are very much like an enum in TypeScript or Java. So for example, let's take a JavaScript example. You want to retrieve something from the server, so a string. So you will declare a variable like that, for example, that will be null at first, then a boolean that will be false, true, sorry. You want to know if it's an error, so you have another boolean, okay. And you have three variables to represent only one thing. It's a remote string that you will fetch on your servers that can be loading, that can be an error. So you have three variables only for this concept. And for example, right here, is loading is true and is an error is true also, which is kind of weird because if there was an error, it shouldn't be loading. Or so you have some incompatible states that can happen. In Elm, you will create a new type and say, okay, my remote string is something that is maybe not loaded, or maybe it's loaded. So here it looks a lot like an enum. But you can also say that it's loaded and it contains a string. So this variant of the enum can contain a string. But you can also say, for example, it's an error and it contains one error code and one error message. Sorry, it's loading. So, as you can see, the error is pretty nice too. So after that, I can say, okay, my remote string is equals to not loaded. So you have a remote string that is not loading. When it's loading, you can say, okay, it's loading. Or you can say, okay, it's you've retrieved the string, so it contains the string hello. It's something loaded. Or you can say there was an error, 400 bad request. So this is kind of like an enum, but with values inside. So it's pretty nice to really represent what you want to represent. Okay. Do we have null? We don't have null inside the language, maybe undefined. No. In Elm, we have something that is called nothing. So pretty nice, they've just renamed it. In fact, if you have a look at the null reference on Google, you can maybe find this quote from Tony Hoare. I call it my $1 billion mistake. So Tony Hoare is the inventor of the null reference. So it says, this is my $1 billion mistake. This has led to innumerable errors, vulnerabilities, and system crashes. So Tony Hoare's advised to not use the null reference because this is what can cause runtime exception. So in Elm, we've not just renamed nothing undefined into nothing. Nothing is something quite special. If you have a look at the type, it's something that is a maybe of something. So this is a type variable. We're getting used to that. So this is a maybe. A maybe is a custom type defined like this. So maybe of A is nothing or just something of type A. So for example, you can say my string is nothing, meaning it has no value, or you can say it's just hello. So it contains a value which is hello. So the main difference with JavaScript is that the compiler knows, because of the type of the variable, that it's a maybe and it can be nothing. So you have to handle every case in Elm, so the compiler will force you to handle the case where it's nothing. That's why you can't have any runtime exception because of undefined values in Elm. Oh, that's pretty nice. I think we've seen almost all syntax, just two things we haven't seen. If you have a complex expression like here, you can use a let-in block to split it. For example, here I've split it in two variables, 24 and 16. 24 and 16. In the in, you can use the variables that you've declared right here in the let block. So pretty simple. And you have the case of expression, which is kind of a switch in JavaScript, except that you're not matching the value itself, but also the pattern, the structure of this value. So for example, here I can say if it's equal to 0, okay, I will return 0. If it's equal to 1, I will return 1. But if it's anything else, and here anything else is a variable, so it can catch every structure because a variable can contain anything, I will return that. If I'm not using this variable, the convention is to use an underscore to say I won't use the value. You can also use case-of on custom types. It's its main use case. For example, here I have a maybe of string. I can say if it's nothing, I will return my string maybe. But if it's equal, for example, to just hello, it will match with this member, and it will say, okay, my string will contain hello, so my string is a variable that will contain hello, and then you can return hello inside the body of this member. Okay, so to go further, we will build a really, really simple application in Elm, which is head or tail, so really simple. If you have a look, we can start a new game. Here we have flipped a coin, and we're asking the user to choose between head and tails, and maybe it will be right, maybe it won't. So if we have a look at the current version, this one, it's not doing anything. We only have the starting screen. So let's see the code. Looking at the code, so we have an index.html file, which will import the compiled program. So Elm compiles to JavaScript, and you can import the JavaScript inside your HTML. And then you will instantiate your application with the init method. So let's have a look at the Elm code. Here we have the module declaration. So each file is a module and is declared with a name. It can expose something to other modules. Then you can import something from other modules. So here we are importing some things to handle a browser application and HTML. We'll see that later. And main is the heart of your program. Here it's a program, as you can see with the type annotation. So it's a program which is an element. It means it will take control over an element inside the DOM. And you have a few elements. So doing application in Elm, we've noticed that we're always using the same pattern that was standardized under the Elm architecture. So the Elm architecture is basically one data flow. So you have a model. A model is a type that you defined. And this type can contain everything, every state of your application. So any variable that you can have inside your application is stored inside this type, the model that you define. So this model is given as parameter to a view function that you declare. So you have a view function that receives this model as argument, and you return some HTML to the runtime. So you have a view function that returns the HTML that will be displayed. The runtime will display this HTML. And every time something happens, for example, when the user clicks on something, the runtime will generate a message, which is a type that you defined yourself. So it will trigger a message. This message will be sent to another function that you declare, the update function. The update function will receive the current model, this message, until it will return a new model, a new updated model. This model will be transmitted to the view function to display the new view, etc. So it's a circular data flow that looks like a lot like Redux, if you're used to using Redux, because Redux was inspired by the Elm architecture. So going back to the code, so we have the init function, which is the initial model. So here we can see that it's the first model of our application. We also have something that is a command. We will see later what it is. We have the update function. Now let's start with the view function. So we have the view function. The view function receives the model that we have declared right here. So model is a custom types with only one variant. It's the first state of the application, the new game. So the view receives this model and returns some HTML. So in Elm, HTML is created by using Elm function, taking two arguments. The first one is a list of attributes, for example, class, ID, and click, etc. And the second is a list of child elements. So here the only child is a button with a class button primary containing the text start a new game. So if you have a look at the application, it's this button. Okay, sorry. And we have the update function which takes a message. The message is the type that we've declared. Here we don't have any kind of message, so I've just put a placeholder message. So it receives a message, a model, and it returns a new model. But here, as you can see, we are always returning the same model, so it's not doing anything. So our application cannot do anything because the update is not doing anything. So let's try to implement this second screen, so this one. So here it doesn't work. We need a second state in our model. So let's add a new state, which is again state, meaning that we have started the game. So now what we need to do is check what is the model inside the view. So we will use case of, and if it's a no game, we can display what we were displaying. So the start screen. But if it's a game, we need to display the game view. So I have a little helper right here. So when it's a game, we can display the question and the two buttons. Let's try that. It doesn't work because if you have a look right here, we are not sending any message to the runtime. So here we need to create a new message to say, okay, we need to flip the coin. So it's a message that you can create. And when we're clicking on the new start button, we will send this message. So on click, we will send this message to the application. So if we have a look, clicking on the button now triggers some messages. So we have some messages that are sent it to the runtime. But if you have a look at the model, it never changed because the update function is not doing anything, as we said earlier. So let's have a look at the update function. Here, we need to know what has happened. So let's say that if our message is a flip coin, then we need to change the model. So the model was a no game, and now we need a game. So let's have a look. And now it works. As you can see, we have a flip coin message that is triggered. The flip coin message is sent to the update function that will change the model to a game. Earlier, I said that when you click on the button, you flip a coin. So here we need to store the coin state. So let's add a parameter to the game and say that it contains the coin state. So let's create a coin state model, which is either head or tail. So as you can see, you can really represent what you want to represent. You don't have to use a Boolean to implement things like that. So it contains a coin state. I have an error because my variant is wrong. So let's go to the error. So right here, I need to give it something. Let's say I give it a head. And here, I don't care about what is the value, so I will just use underscore. it should compile. Yeah, it compiles, so it works. Okay. If I have a look now, my model contains a game head. But here it's always head, so it's not really nice because the game will be pretty easy. So we need to generate a random coin. But in Elm, remember, it's a functional programming language, meaning there is no side effect. You can't generate a random value because that will mean that the same function will return something different when you call it with the same parameters. So we need something else. In Elm, you don't execute side effects, you let the runtime execute them. So in the update function, you can return a command, and the command is basically an order that you will give to the Elm runtime to say, okay, I need you to do something, please do it, and use a message to return the result value. So for example, here we want to generate a random coin, so we will create a recipe to explain to the runtime how to generate a random coin. We won't generate it, and the runtime will flip the coin according to the recipe and return the result inside the message. So the recipe is called a generator of coin state. So it's a generator that generates coin state. And the runtime will receive a command of type message that it will use to generate your value. So let's have a look. First, we need to create a coin generator. So let's create a random coin, which is a generator of coin state. So for that, we will use the random package. So we will say that it's a random.uniform, so it's a uniform probability of head or tail. So it will generate either head or tail with a uniform probability. Here we cannot just give this argument because remember I said that the APIs were really well thought. And what would happen if someone was using it like that? Here you're asking to the uniform method to generate a random value inside no value. So it cannot actually generate a value. So random.uniform needs a non-empty list. And what is a not-empty list? It's in fact a list with at least one element and another list that can be empty. So a non-empty list is one element and a list that can be empty. So it has always at least this element to generate. So here we have a random coin generator. And here in the update, we need to tell the compiler that we want to generate a random coin. Once it has generated this value, we need to get it back. So for this, we will create a new message, which is coin flipped, which will contain a coin state. So we can give that as argument to random.generate. So once the coin is flipped, the compiler will return a new message that we need to handle. So here, the coin has been flipped, so we can store it inside the state. And we don't need any more side effects, so let's return command.none. Here we haven't really a game head, we still have a no game waiting for the coin to be flipped. And now it should work. So if we have a look at the application, now we have a random value that is generated. Perfect. Let's create the third screen, the result screen. So let's create that with a game state. Once again, we can create a type for the game state and say it's either win or loss. Okay. In the view function, you have an error because you haven't handled this case. So let's create the result view. Sorry. So perfect, we have the result view. And now when we are clicking on this button, we need to decide what to display. So let's create a new message, which is a player bet. So the player will bet on some coin state. So here, when we are clicking on head, we want to generate a player bed on head. And here, when we're clicking our tails, we want to generate a player bed on tail. So perfect. We have an error in the update because we are not handling the new message. Here we will just say, okay, if it's if my model equals to game the coin state that the player is betting on, it's a win, else it's a loss. Oh, sorry, else it's a loss. So, okay, and we will use that and say this is a result containing the result and no command. Perfect, it compiles, it should work. Let's have a look. Where is this? Right here. So let's start a new game. As we can see, it's a tail. So if I click on tail, I win. Here, it's tail again. So if I click on head, it fails. So this is how you create application in Elm. You create some state, some model. Then you have some message that can change the state of your application. And in the update function, you're just updating your state accordingly. So it's pretty easy to understand. And the compiler can really help you implement things because it will only compile once everything is done. So let's have a look at the advantage of Elm. So Elm has a really great developer experience because of the error messages, because of the tooling, because of the community. You have no runtime exception, so which is pretty nice. Very good. It has a great debugger. As you can see, I can see exactly what happens inside my application. I can go back in time to different state. I can export this to someone, so it's pretty nice. The stake system is really powerful. It will always try to reduce the possibilities of your variables to handle less and less case, so it's really nice. The performance is really great, and the community, once again, is amazing. It has some drawbacks. For example, the governance model. It's basically a one-man project because Evan Saplicki is the one decided for everything. So if you're not happy with what he wants to do with the language, it's not good. So it depends on what you want. And some people find it a bit verbose because everything is explicit. So for example, for navigation or something like that, you have to explicitly do something. But for me, it's an advantage because you understand everything that happens. Nothing is hidden. And the asynchronous JavaScript communication can be a bit destabilizing at first, because you only can communicate with JavaScript through messages. So you send a message and you wait for an answer. So it can be surprising at first. Why should you use them? Because you have a complex UI or a complex model, a lot of change happening inside your application, and you want to understand what is happening. Elm is really good for complex applications. You have frequent refactoring because Elm really shines during refactorings. You care for bugs, of course. If you don't want your production to be full of bugs, Elm will help with that. If you want to go into functional programming language like Haskell, Elm is really a gentle introduction to these languages. If you want to write better code, because since I started Elm, my JavaScript has become more readable and better for me. You can start today working with Elm with my workshop. So it's a workshop on GitHub that you can clone and then follow the steps. Everything is described inside the README. And if you want to have the links to these slides, they are available right here. Thank you for listening.